So, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier just came out, and as usual, I've got some pretty uncontroversial thoughts about it. As the title suggests, the show does a lot right, but it also does a lot wrong. Before you execute me just like John Walker did to that one flag smasher, I mainly just wanted to analyze what the show did to enhance its story, considering it has such a simple plot, this being to just stop the flag smashers. So does having a simple plot make stories in general worse, or does a story need some Christopher Nolan level writing to be engaging? We're gonna talk about all that in today's video essay, but before I get into it, I just want to say if you enjoyed today's video, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. And if you want to stay updated with all my content and hear some pretty stupid stuff, just follow my Twitter at Machuw. Alright, let's get into it. So let's get back to the main topic at hand. Is having a simple plot bad? To be blunt, absolutely not. My favorite MCU movie is Avengers Infinity War. And what's the plot of that movie? It's about stopping a big purple man from getting some rocks. That's it. But how can a movie that simple be my favorite? Am I just stupid? Well, yes. But what enhances the movie so much is its huge sense of urgency, gigantic stakes, and amazing visual storytelling. From beginning to end, we're focused on this one main plotline, and it actually enhances the story since the plot is so quickly established, and we don't have to waste any time getting to the good stuff. What's another thing with a simple story that people think is generally a masterpiece? Daredevil Season 3. And yes, I know it's basically becoming a meme with how much I talk about it on this channel. But if you think about it, what's the main plot and goal of the season? To stop Fisk and put him back in prison. That's it. But what enhances the story is the amazing characterization, its complex themes about faith, love, and abandonment. Along with this, its amazing well fleshed out antagonists, great visual storytelling, and a killer pace. So where does the Falcon and the Winter Soldier land on this, and how does it either enhance or make the story worse? Let's start off with how the show tackles its main themes, the main one being legacy is 100% one of the most abundant themes in the show. We get to see our characters, particularly Sam Wilson, deal with the fallout of Captain America's mantle. We get to see what it means to him and how he personally chooses to reject the shield because 1, he feels he isn't worthy, and 2, he doesn't think that America would respond well to a black Captain America, so his solution is to just let it sit in a museum. This is where John Walker gets introduced, where he also has to deal with the legacy, and he too grapples with the idea that he can't handle something like this. This is where we go deep into the question of what does it mean to be Captain America? Meanwhile, Bucky is responding in a way of disdain because he feels that if that shield ends up in the wrong hands, it'll be his fault. It's a lot of pressure to live up to someone who is essentially perfect, and the show does a great job of representing this. So the theme here is really fleshed out because it's affecting everyone in a different way. Speaking of fallout, we get to see the world post-blip, which leads me into the Flag Smashers, where we're introduced to our main antagonist, Karli Morgenthau. Her ideology is that things were better during the blip, so the Captain America mantle represents an era that she doesn't want to go back to, and one of her main objectives is to actually kill Captain America to make a point. So this theme of legacy and what gets left behind is heavily explored through each character, which creates some great conflict in the show, so even though the plot's simple, it's really investing. Now on to this right here is extremely important. Some of my favorite movies are character studies such as The Truman Show, Moonlight, Joker, Drive, Jojo Rabbit, Blade Runner 2049, and many more. The thing here is that if the characterization ever gets uninteresting, then the movie or show just sort of gets screwed since it's so heavily reliant on that. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a pretty clear case of character studies both enhancing the story and dragging it down due to poor development. First, let's start off with a character whose arc is absolutely perfect. The journey Sam Wilson went on here is extremely well fleshed out. Seeing him philosophically struggle for a country that probably doesn't deserve all the time and effort he keeps putting into it is pretty gripping. His ideologies are greatly contrasted through Isaiah Bradley, who is still haunted by his traumatic past of being imprisoned and tortured for 30 years just because he was a black super soldier. This leads to a lot of interesting internal conflict where Sam even more so believes the world won't accept a black Captain America. But at the same time, all that pain and suffering would have been for nothing if Sam doesn't at least try to take on the mantle and change the world's perception. Also, God, that ending was so good. I low-key teared up. Anyway, even though the Winter Soldier is in the title, this is really Sam's show first and foremost. Everything he does contributes to the plot, themes, and highly enhances the story with his arc. Bucky is a character that has a few arcs, such as learning to work with others, accepting other people's perspectives, and the main one being to be at peace with his demons. His character has a great introduction, but then once he's thrusted into the main plot of stopping the Flag Smashers, his character just sort of goes static, and then it's briefly brought up in the end of episode 5, and then just quickly dealt with at the end of episode 6, in one scene and a brief montage. It just didn't really feel earned. There was so much to do with his character, but his arc just became sidelined, and that was pretty disappointing. Next up with John Walker. He was honestly one of the most compelling characters in this show, and he was being elevated, becoming one of my favorite characters in the entire MCU. The show begs the question of, what if an ordinary guy who wants to do the right thing was put into the role of Captain America? A lot of people were judging him, but why? At the end of the day, he just wants to do right by his country and serve, so why can't he be Captain America? His arc of not getting the respect he feels he deserves and being torn about how to deal with the mantle is so compelling. He was giving me Bullseye from Daredevil vibes with his descent to becoming a monster, and then he pulls a 180 and becomes good in the finale. I mean, eventually I would have wanted this to happen, but it felt very jarring, like his character was in such a bad headspace, and then in the next episode he's patting Bucky on the shoulder, making jokes. It felt very odd. The show didn't do much to make this lightness versus darkness side for Walker, as we didn't personally see enough of his light side for this to make sense. It felt like a very rushed character arc, and I wasn't a fan of it. He was so much more compelling as an antagonist, and it was beyond disappointing that his character was stripped away from all that intrigue. Meanwhile, you have characters that are just okay, such as Zemo and Sharon. They don't really do much if I'm being honest, and you could just replace them with another character and it'd work fine. Their main purpose is to set up future projects. They're nowhere near as bad as Monica and WandaVision, but they could have been better. Lastly, Carly Morgenthau. She's 100% the worst part, which especially sucks because she's the main antagonist. So if she doesn't work, then a good chunk of the show's stakes and plot falls apart. The main issue with her is that her lack of development, and that we're constantly told how to feel about her rather than just experiencing it. For example, we constantly get characters like Sharon, Falcon, and Carly herself expressing that she's not getting enough supplies, or that the GRC screwed her over, or that she lost someone really close to her such as Mama Danya. But we never feel or experience any of that. How does the lack of supplies affect her community? What was life during the blip like for her? Why should I care that she lost Mama Danya? What did she mean to her on a personal level? For example, we should have gotten a few scenes with Mama Danya and Carly where Mama Danya expresses her idealism, and we learn to become sympathetic for these characters. And since the GRC isn't giving them enough supplies they need to survive, Mama Danya dies in Carly's arms. This will give us motivation, perspective, and relatability to her on a grounded level. It's very odd since her character is pretty similar to Walker, as in they're both people descending into becoming a monster. And it's completely understandable in Walker's perspective, as his best friend was murdered in front of him and he's got all this pressure riding on his shoulders. But the show does little to nothing to make me care about the cause Carly's fighting for. And it doesn't help that she does a lot of extreme stuff in the show, yet we keep being told she's a good person. I mean, she blows up buildings with people still in them, lights cars on fire with innocent civilians inside, and quite frankly, does way worse things than John Walker, yet Sam is much more sympathetic with Carly and just chooses violence with Walker. I'm just not entirely sure what the writers wanted us to feel here with that, because there's pretty much zero pathos for Carly. It really wouldn't surprise me if the rumor of Carly having a pandemic storyline were true, because it does feel weird that she's the only one who had poor development considering she's our main antagonist. Now the last thing I want to get into here is, I mentioned before that Infinity's simple plot works so well because its pace is breakneck. Having such a simple plot lets us dive right into the action, getting to know the characters, their motivations, and how they react to the current environment surrounding them. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier's pace is, well, it's all over the place. For example, you get episodes where it's just focusing on them going on dates, getting denied a bank loan, and then in another episode a million things happen where Walker executes a man and Zemo destroys all the serum. And then in the next episode we're seeing our characters talking about life and just fixing a boat. I mean, I love stuff like that. This episode was great individually, but it hardly sets up the finale and it sort of kills the pace of the story, even though it's really entertaining character-driven content. In short, having a really complex plot doesn't necessarily make your story more interesting. For example, Christopher Nolan's latest movie, Tenet, is this hugely complex movie about time inversion, and I didn't really know what was going on. But having a complex plot wasn't what killed it. It was that it was only focused on the plot and never the characters. I mean, you know your movie has a character problem when the character has no name and is literally called the protagonist.
I'm the protagonist.
Sometimes just focusing on the strong themes, characterization, and pace of your story is all you need. Unfortunately, the show isn't able to succeed in all these areas, which can lead to an inconsistent pace, rushed character arcs, and dull stakes. But the show does a fantastic job as well, as it fleshes out its complex themes, some side characters, and its main protagonist. The show represents how great the MCU can be, but also has quite a few flaws. All in all, I think the MCU is headed in the right direction, and I hope this keeps the uniqueness going forward. If I had to give the show a rating, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. So what'd you guys think of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier? And do you also agree with that having a simple plot is fine? Or did you need a little bit more from the show? Either way, I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions down below, and if you enjoyed watching, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. Anyway, in celebration of Chloe Zhao, who's the upcoming director of Marvel's Eternals and the director of Nomadland, who just recently won Best Director and Best Picture at the Oscars, I want to end the video off with her opinions on prioritizing character over plot.
They say character, plot, which one is first? I find I have a tendency to go for plot, and that's in school, and that could be very dangerous. And if you can't describe your plot in a Wikipedia page, that plot summary, then you've got a problem. If you can't make it interesting in that sort of, no, I have to do all this, then you have no space for character.